Erika Balm, a being in all respects highly gifted by nature, was alone in the world. She had neither home, friends, property, nor protection. A lot so entirely destitute was perhaps needful to enable her to fulfill the duties of the station in which she now found herself. About 20 years previous to the time of which we speak, a rich and childless widow went from the country to reside for a time in Stockholm. She brought home with her from the capital a little girl of 3 years old, whom she had taken from the foundling hospital. No one knew anything of her parents, nor had any inquiry ever been made respecting her. But her generous foster mother supplied to her the want of all natural ties, and under her watchful care Erika reached her 14th year. A firm foundation had been laid for the cultivation both of her mind and heart when she had the misfortune to lose her kind protectress. Mrs. Balm died suddenly while on a journey, without having concluded any arrangement for the future welfare of her charge, although she had fully intended to do so. The unprotected girl, whose natural talents had been cultivated in a manner that might be termed unfortunate, since her fitting position in society had not been secured to her, was now suddenly called on to forsake the path which had been opened to her, and to apply herself, with patient resignation, to the untried task of watching over and amusing a family of spoiled, self-willed children. Mrs. Malm's heir, a distant relative, as a particular favor, had taken Erika along with the rest of the property, and it was in the house of Consul N. at Gothenburg that this young girl, thrown out of the circle of home life and family affection, first became aware how deep were the shadows of life. Mrs. Malm, herself a humble-minded religious woman, had early implanted in Erika's soul that precious seed which, when sprung up and ripened in a woman's heart, can alone guard her against the baneful influence of self-deception. Accustomed to try all her feelings and inclinations, whether good or evil, as they arose in her heart, Erika continued to educate herself. She strove to overcome her faults, and avoided the display of any superiority which might awaken the envy of others. Without companions of her own age, and never having known any more enlivening aspect of life than the quiet abode of her foster mother, where strict order and discipline, united with tender treatment, Erika's disposition had acquired a grave and thoughtful turn, which procured for her the nickname of the little old woman. But time wore on and removed the contrast between her youth and her serious demeanor. The child became the graceful maiden, and at the age of 19, Erika, in her lowly dependent situation, was indebted to her modest composure for the respect which, in spite of poverty and neglect, was never refused to her. She had continued to reside in Consul N.'s family, because it never occurred to her that she had the right to withdraw from it, merely on account of the mental and physical famine she there endured. From nursery maid she had risen to the double post of housekeeper and governess, and the discharge of both duties was rendered burdensome by a variety of small but vexatious annoyances, not to be fully comprehended except by those who have cast a sympathizing glance on some unfortunate girl in the same situation. Early in the morning, Erika must so arrange household affairs for the day as to be ready to receive the children at 8 o'clock, and if at any time this was found to be impossible, angry expressions were not wanting, which readily turned into vehement reproaches whenever the children chose to complain of her, the weak-minded mother always receiving their representations as gospel truth. Besides this, Mrs. N., whose vanity was extreme, generally appropriated for her own dress a great part of the sum allowed by her husband for the household expenses, and Erika had to bear the united indignation of master and mistress, children and servants, when anything was wanting which she had not to give. 2 nights in the week she stood by the oven baking bread, for in the daytime nothing of the kind was permitted. And if in the morning she laid her head for a moment on her pillow, Mrs. N came in all haste to inquire if Mademoiselle intended to lie in bed one day in the week. Still, all this was what might be borne, for the daily grudgings of avarice and the coarse hints of the many benefits she enjoyed, Erika consoled herself every evening by the consciousness that she hourly made ample compensation for such benefactions. She also sought comfort in the belief that there were some beings in the world born to suffer, and that she herself, cut off as she was from domestic ties and every species of kindness, was one of these. But a circumstance occurred against which her pure religious feeling revolted, something which she did not consider herself obliged to endure, but on the contrary, impelled by every motive to escape from. This was the persecution she was exposed to from the insulting admiration which the master of the family, an immoral and unprincipled man, did not hesitate to profess for her, and which, notwithstanding the perfect propriety of her conduct, she at length saw no prospect of putting an end to, otherwise than by quitting his house. Her mistress, whose jealousy began to be awakened, treated her in a manner that extinguished the last spark of gratitude still lingering in her bosom, and without a friend to whom she could apply for advice or assistance, she one evening took the opportunity, when Consul N and his lady were absent on a visit, to carry her resolution into effect. In the morning it was discovered she had left the house immediately after the family had gone out, without giving any intimation where she proposed to go. And it was not till after many weeks had elapsed, on her applying through an acquaintance in the town for a church certificate, which is required on a change of residence, it became known that she had found a refuge among the rocks of the Skärgård. Erika's mind was strong, and her body also. She was therefore able to accomplish what she saw to be her duty, both as regarded herself and Mrs. N. But where was an asylum immediately to be found for one who had suddenly and apparently in so suspicious a manner left the house in which she had lived for years? A feeling of timid apprehension withheld her from seeking protection from any of her acquaintances in the town. It occurred to her rather to try to find some situation amongst the inhabitants of the Skärgård, and without long consideration she put on her bonnet and shawl, and walked down to the harbor to see if any boats were there ready to sail. She had scarcely arrived when her attention was attracted by the appearance of a woman, whose dress, although both neat and fine in quality, was of the peculiar form worn by the females of the Skärgård district. She was walking about as if waiting for someone, and soon after was joined by a man carrying a number of packages. As soon as they had met, the woman went on before and stepped into one of the largest boats, in which she proceeded to stow away the articles she had purchased. Resolved to take advantage of this favorable opportunity, Erika sprang lightly on the landing place, and in a moment stood upon the well-scoured deck beside the stranger. The acquaintance was soon formed, and Dame Hoddleson, as the stranger was called, assured Erika that as the boat belonged to her husband, she could readily grant her permission to accompany her. Happy in having thus far succeeded, Erika hastened home, and taking from thence the clothing which she most needed, returned with a lightened heart to the boat, which sailed away before the bell rang for evening prayers. It was a clear, calm, delightful summer's evening, and the poor, homeless, friendless girl, seated by the side of the kind-hearted Mother Hoddleson, related her short, sad, and eventful history. With ready sympathy, the worthy and compassionate woman endeavored to console the dejected girl, and after permitting her to enjoy a short slumber, awoke her at daybreak to say the boat was moored at Tistelön. Erika arose in a more composed and cheerful frame of mind, and with renewed confidence that God would prove himself the father of the fatherless. Both the elder Haraldsson and his son made a disagreeable impression upon the educated and refined Erika, but she found herself drawn by cords of love toward the kind-hearted woman who had sympathized so tenderly with her sorrows. Mother Haraldsson, as she was usually called, might have assumed the title of mistress, like the wives of other rich inhabitants of the rocks, whose husbands owned boats and manufactures, but she despised such vanities, and though the daughter of a clergyman, would receive no appellation but that of good mother. By this name and her kindly disposition, she soon won completely the heart of Erika. A sincere friendship immediately grew up between them, and it was determined that she should remain an inmate of Mother Haraldsson's household. Mother Haraldsson possessed a treasure dearer to her heart than all other things in the world, her little Gabrielle, who was then 3 years old. With the deepest grief, this excellent woman witnessed the lawless life of her husband and stepson, and was constantly anticipating some disastrous end to their bold and criminal enterprises. She mourned in silence over that which she had not power to change, and thanked God for the consolation that in the event of her own death, this tender blossom, already called the Rose of Tistelön, on account of her singular beauty, would not be left to the rough guardianship of her relatives, but find in Erika a safe guide and protectress. The poor orphan, unaccustomed to such refreshing feelings as human love and pure benevolence, with a heart that was ever yearning for the affection of others, and without one being on the wide earth to cherish and return that affection, listened with pleasure to the urgent and oft-repeated solicitations to remain with those who held her in their bosoms and seek no other home. What cared this poor maiden for the barren and desolate rocks? What cared she for the rough nature of those who surrounded her? The chilling blasts might sweep over the Baltic, the tempest might lower in the heavens. She beheld only the sincere gratitude that sparkled in Mother Brita's eyes. She felt only that the charming little rose, nourished by her affection, daily took firmer root in her heart. It was a delightful task for Erika to watch over this hopeful child, to witness the earliest development of her faculties, the gradual expansion of her nature, and to anticipate the future perfection of a being whom it had pleased heaven in her infancy thus to adorn and exalt. The calm and dignified deportment of Erika exerted also a subduing influence upon the rough nature of the two pirates. She inspired them with a respect and a refinement which became the more apparent the longer she remained among them. In her presence their conversation was less offensive, their manners more subdued, and the influence she acquired over Birger, in particular, astonished even herself. One single look of her mild eyes, one solitary tone of her musical voice, bent the unruly will of men whom nothing else on earth and nothing in heaven could subdue. For the purpose of pleasing Erika and rendering her residence upon the isle as long and agreeable as possible, the new apartment to which we have alluded had been added to the house, and furnished in the manner which we have already described. Day by day, new decorations were added to Erika's room. New luxuries were brought from secret receptacles known to Haraldsson and his son, and their guest was astonished at the quantity and variety of splendid furniture which was concealed within the walls of this mouldering hovel. It was a long time before she discovered with affliction and disgust from whence all this splendor was obtained, and from that time she refused to allow any further embellishments to be added to her own and Gabrielle's apartment. Scarcely a year had passed away after Erika's arrival at the island, when the good, the affectionate, the patient Brita was released from her daily cross. She died of grief, deep, consuming grief, and her last moments, her latest thoughts, were for her child. To Erika's care she entrusted Gabriella, requiring from her the solemn promise that she would not, unless forced by extreme necessity, leave the house or forsake the being she had laid upon her heart. She then turned to her son, the youthful Anton, whose soft and yielding disposition much resembled his mother's, and made him shrink from taking part in the wild enterprises which at 10 years old he was already a witness to. He now held his mother's cold hand in his, and vowed never to do that which his conscience condemned, and that as soon as he was of age he would seek employment elsewhere, unless ere that time his father and brother had reformed their way of life. Mother Britta was no more, and even Haraldsson's iron breast seemed to be touched by remorse and grief for what was now irremediable. But time permitted the rude materials of his nature to harden more and more, and he became wild, cruel, and reckless as before. Excepting his idolatry of the little Gabriella, no trace of natural feeling was perceptible. Years came and passed away. The masses of rock were still washed by the salt waves of the Kattegat, and the furious autumnal storms, year after year, strewed the shore with fresh wrecks. It was a painful, anxious, yet monotonous life that Erika led on the desolate island, but custom and love for her foster daughter united to the depressing conviction that she was beloved on no other spot of earth, that no heart beat in sympathy with her own, or cared to know where she existed, produced in her inmost soul a quiet endurance, a passive acquiescence in her destiny. She no longer wished to forsake the path marked out for her, but on the contrary derived support and consolation from the thought that exactly in her present situation she was of the most service to her fellow creatures. Of late, however, she had suffered additional anxiety from a cause she had not hitherto been able to explain or comprehend. She had discovered that the feeling which held such powerful sway over the mind of Birgir was of a nature of which she had had no experience. That it was love could not be doubted, but love, wild and stormy, that inspired terror, although she carefully concealed it. She felt that it was only by calmness and perfect self-possession that she could hope to restrain the fiery tempers that surrounded her. During the last few weeks, however, matters had so far changed that Birgir seems as anxiously to avoid her society as he had before eagerly sought it. Erika even thought that on those occasions when she had been most mild and gentle towards him, his temper and manners had taken the same impression. But since, in consequence of her discovery of his sentiments, she had again begun to treat him with coldness and reserve, he had become dark and threatening as the night when it spreads its stormy wings over the troubled ocean. But we return to the night on which we introduced the reader to the smugglers of Tistelön. Gabriella had fallen asleep. Erika sat at the table and continued to work, but inward disquiet prevented her giving much attention to her employment. Why must they go out again tonight, thought she, as she listened to the noise in the room below, and knew that preparations were making for the projected expedition. She implored strength from heaven and wisdom to direct her for the best. Could she continue to spend her life in such dangerous society, and to endure besides the unholy passion that glowed in Birgir's eyes? Ought she to struggle with, conquer, and lead back to virtue a fellow creature now on the verge of ruin? Or could she summon up resolution again to go forth and seek another home in a world which had already cast her out before she had yet learned to understand what is meant by the term constitution of society. But even allowing the possibility of obtaining a respectable situation for herself, could she bear the idea of forsaking the motherless child whom she had solemnly sworn to protect? The struggle in Erika's bosom was long and severe. Never since her arrival on the island had her mind been so agitated as this evening, and never had the October storm, now increasing in violence, seemed to her so appalling. It raged in the black depths beneath her window, while the deep baying of the watchdog sounded in dismal unison with the blast as it swept round the house. God in heaven, protect all who are at sea this dreadful night, prayed Erika, as she devoutly clasped her hands and allowed her head to sink on her bosom. A creaking sound was heard on the stairs. "They're going to the left," thought the anxious girl. But the steps approached her chamber door, and with suppressed breathing she listened to a deep-toned voice which said, "Open the door, Mademoiselle Erika." It was Birger's voice. Erika had scarcely power to rise from her chair. More than 2 years had elapsed since he had stood on the threshold of that room, which had ever been held sacred by all the inmates of the dwelling. What could he mean by this untimely visit? Upon the knocking being repeated, she rose, and with recovered self-possession said, without, however, opening the door, "What do you want so late, Birger? Have I not left everything in order?" "Yes, certainly. But as you are still up, you may open the door. I have something to say to you." "Well, say it then. I can hear you perfectly." "Are you afraid?" was the contemptuous reply, while his forced laugh echoed through the empty passage. "Oh, no. Why should I be afraid?" answered Erika, who at these words resumed all her natural courage, and hastily drawing back the bolt, she opened the door, and with calm dignity stood before her visitor. "Now, what is it you wish, Birger?" was her composed question. "What I wish you will, perhaps, know soon enough. Do not be so severe. Let me look about me. I have not been here for so long, very long. I did not venture and did not wish to disturb you, much as I wished to be near you, Mademoiselle Erika." He stepped toward the table, on which lay an open psalm book beside Erika's work. Birger bent down and read the lines where her mark was placed. At first he appeared to do this merely to gain time to arrange his thoughts on what he was about to say. But after a pause of some minutes, he pronounced the words aloud, and in a tone of feeling wholly unexpected by Erika. "The Lord will give his promised aid. His word is ever sure. If I in him do put my trust, and to the end endure. Then let me still, with cheerful zeal, my daily course fulfill. Contented with my lot, I bow to his most righteous will." I wish, Mademoiselle Erika, that I could read these lines with the same devotion and edification as you do. "Oh, why should you not do so, Birger? If you read the Holy Scriptures more frequently, you would understand them better. You would find in them strength to do right and defense against temptation. Both to your heart and mind would be benefited." "My heart and mind are both evil, Mademoiselle Erika. Left to myself, my own efforts alone will never make them better." "Oh, that is indeed true, Birger, and that you acknowledge. It is well, and like a Christian. But prayer can do so much, and—" "No, not my prayers, Erika," interrupted Birger with strong emotion. "I might yet become another man, a better man, if— Oh, but it is impossible. I was mad indeed, ever to think that you would consent to marry an unbred fellow like me. Yes, you turn pale. It was a bold thought enough. Nevertheless, It is right that you should know, Mamselle Erika, that if you could make up your mind to so great a sacrifice, you would have no cause to be ashamed of me. I am resolved at all events to study navigation this winter, and instead of living, as at present, on chance expeditions, I intend to build myself a vessel, and trade in it to Jutland, both as captain and owner. And you should have a house as handsome as you could wish, instead of this rickle which I shall pull down, and you would be as respectable a housewife as any in these parts. During this long address, which was delivered with considerable self-confidence, Erika had time to recover in some degree from her unpleasant surprise. The idea of uniting herself in marriage with such a man as Birger filled her with horror, while at the same time there was something in his manly, energetic, always decided mode of action that harmonized with her own strong mind. She felt as if she could make any sacrifice for his good, except that of becoming his wife. And she therefore replied with perfect frankness, "No, Birger, your proposal I neither can nor will consent to, not because I think myself above you, as you hinted just now. I know too well what I am, a child of poverty at least. It may be of guilt. Well, therefore any honest man is good enough for a husband to the poor Erika. But there is another reason, Birger, which you must know, and which, both now and in future, will prevent me from even thinking of agreeing to what you wish. Ever since I came to this place, your wild and certainly often sinful manner of life has terrified me. I have always considered you as a man in whom I could never feel confidence, and where confidence does not exist, it is in vain to think of love. My friendship, however, I will not withhold from you. Conduct yourself in such a manner as to deserve my esteem and that of others, and I will ever regard you as a brother." "Why, thank you. You're so kind, Mademoiselle Erika," said Birger with haughty bitterness. "Permit me also to tell you what it may perhaps be worth your while to consider. Remember that you have now, at this moment, in your hands the destiny of a human being, for the present life, and in all likelihood for that which is to come. Erika," continued he in a subdued tone of an anxious entreaty, "you are good and pious. You wish to turn the sinner from his evil way. You may do it now, for I solemnly swear, if you will become my wife, I will from that hour abandon all such courses as would make me fear to meet your eye. But if you drive me from you, then," and his voice resumed its harshness, "there's nothing on earth has power to hold me back. I have hitherto been wild and daring, but my most wicked actions have inflicted no positive injury upon mankind. But despised, rejected, and scorned by you, Erika, having all that is pure and holy in my nature driven from me by your rejection, hating myself and the whole world, even detesting you, the name of Birger Haraldsson shall be the terror of the coast." For the first time in her life, Erika trembled before this bold, bad man, whom she had hitherto been accustomed to rule by a glance, a gesture, a word. She felt that an awful responsibility rested upon her. She felt her heart trembling with anxiety and pain. She felt that all her strength was deserting her. Must she sacrifice herself for him? Must she entail a crime-stained name and a heritage of woe upon innocent beings yet unborn? It was terrible to devote herself to such a lot, to bind in thraldom her whole existence upon earth by such a promise. She had sufficient consciousness left to know that such a consent would be more than she could bear, and that she should repent for many a long and weary year the error which the necessity of a moment had forced upon her. Erika turned a supplicating and imploring glance toward Birger, while his giant figure seemed, in the uncertain light, to tower into still more colossal proportions, and his eye, to which an unnatural brilliancy was imparted, penetrated her heart, at one moment in humble supplication, and in the next with fierce and commanding threats, before which her own eyelids drooped and her glance sought the floor, as in a low voice her lips slowly murmured, "No, Birgir, no, Birgir, I cannot." "Well, there's yet time to retract. My probation can be a moment prolonged," said he with intense anxiety of look and tone. You can grant my prayer, but you will not. Dear Erika, I am so miserable, so utterly undone and wretched, that on my knees I beg for your mercy." And he actually sank down before the trembling girl, while his countenance denoted inexpressible anguish. After a moment, which was passed in gazing beseechingly on her face, he asked her in an almost frenzied manner, "Will you consent to become my wife?" "Take my life, Birgir, but I cannot command my heart." Birgir rose from his knees. His lips were firmly closed, and the muscles of his face worked convulsively. At the door he turned and said with mingled grief and bitterness, "Farewell, Erika. You must answer before God for all the evil this hour brings with it." "No, Birgir, no. Take back your cruel words. God is just." "Yes, God is just. And if crime is to be my portion, remorse will be yours." He closed the door and descended the stairs with a heavy step. The elder Haraldsson, in the meantime, attired himself for the expedition in breeches of dressed sealskin and a jacket of dark blue frieze. "If you're ready, Birgir, go down to the boat and get the sails set. Let the boy help you with the packages. I will be after you in a trice." He then roused Anton, who lay half asleep in a corner, and ordered him to make ready in a moment. The poor boy sprang up in terror, and submitted patiently to be laden as if he'd been a beast of burden. A heavy sigh forced its way from his oppressed heart. It was answered by his father, who said gruffly, "Shame on you for a cowardly dog. Are you to be better off than your father? Pack off this instant. Remind your mother is not here to complain to." The boy swallowed some bitter tears in silence and went down to the pier with his burden. The large boat was tossed to and fro as if made of paper by the violence of the wind, while preparations were making for departure. Haraldsson himself took his place at the helm, commanding as he did so the favorable weather. The foresail and spritsail were set, and when Birgir had cast another dark glance at the window, from which a faint light still glimmered, the boat put to sea. It plunged into the dark night, and the huge waves seemed to close over the little speck as it vanished in the gloom.